Hello, welcome back to Math 7 with Mr. Passam. Today we are continuing our unit on expressions and equations. We're going to put your knowledge of integers to good use today, because one of the most complicated things and one of the things that people struggle with the most is dealing with the negative coefficients and or negative numbers. So we're going to talk about distributing with a negative number. Alright, so a negative is the opposite of a positive. We're going to think of it, oh, and I need to drop in a text box there. So a negative sign indicates the opposite of a number. Right? We've talked about that before. And the opposite of a number. So let's list the opposite of each of the terms below. So let's make a new little text box here. What is the opposite of 8? Well, that would be negative 8. What is the opposite of negative 5? Positive 5. What's the opposite of x? Negative x. What's the opposite of negative 3x? Positive 3x. What's the opposite of 1? Negative 1. What's the opposite of negative 9x? Well, that would be 9x. Now, anytime we are subtracting, we can think of that as adding a negative. Anytime we are So we're going to think about and use our negatives effectively. Now, when we're multiplying a positive times a negative, we're going to get a negative. Anytime we see a subtraction here, we're going to think of that second term as being a negative term. So when distributing a negative number, you're multiplying each term within the parentheses by the negative number on the outside of the parentheses. This results in finding the opposite of each term within the parentheses. So here we have negative 3 times 2. Well, that is negative 6. Here we have negative 3 times 4x. So that's going to be negative 12x. But anytime we're adding a negative, that's the same as subtracting. So you could think of that as negative 6 minus 12x. Negative 6 minus 12x. I'll just put a little space in there. So, whenever we're adding a negative, remember that's the same as subtracting. And generally, we're going to think of the single term there as the simplified term. So here we've got negative 2 times g. So that's going to be negative 2g. Negative 2 times 5, that's going to be negative 10. So that's going to be minus 10. So it's plus a negative 10, that's minus 10. Go ahead and try this line here. Try to decide what you think is going to happen with this minus if you thought of this as plus a negative 5. Take a minute, go ahead and do it, and if you're feeling pretty good about it, go ahead and do the second line too. Alright, so now let's go through it. We get a negative times a negative is a positive, so we get 2g, and then a negative times a positive is a negative, so, did that by accident. So we get minus 10. That page down button is in a bad place. A negative 2 times g is negative 2g. And then we're thinking of this as plus a negative 5. So negative 2 times negative 5 is a positive 10. So we get plus 10 there. Here we get a negative times a negative. That's a positive. So that's going to be 2g. A negative times a negative is a positive. So that's plus 10. Note that I'm treating the subtraction as if I were adding a negative 5. That's all happening in my brain, and that's why we spent so much time working on those integer rules earlier. Now, if you're not confident with your integer rules, then you need to do some practice. Let's go ahead and do this line. I'm just going to give you the answers. Hopefully you can figure out how I got there. And if not, you're going to want to follow up with some questions about our integer rules. Alright, so here we got every sort of combination. A negative times a positive is a negative times a negative is a positive, and then just sort of applying it, but every time we have a subtraction, we're thinking of it as adding the negative. So we could think of this as 4a plus a negative 2a, do our distribution, and that's why we get a positive 6. Now, the negative sign changed the term. So anytime we started with an addition, it became a subtraction, right? So what did you notice in questions 1 through 4? Every time we had a subtraction, it switched to or every time we had, well, I guess both additions and subtractions changed. So we could say the operation changed, and in each set of parentheses. That's one thing you could have noticed. Well, what are some of the mistakes that someone could make? It's probably pretty easy to forget a negative sign. Or treat a subtraction improperly. And that's why we often try to think of everything in terms of writing it as the addition of the opposite. Okay? Now, some people also, they multiply the first term, and then they forget to multiply by the second term. So that could be another mistake. Forget to multiply all the terms. Alright, so there's lots of different ways to sort of mess this up. And you really have to practice to make sure you get used to doing all of it. Let's go ahead and look at page 2 of the notes. So again, you're going to simplify. I pause the video, get a head start, try to do it on your own, and remember, if you're not practicing, you're not actually going to get any better. And then I will go over the answers in a minute. Okay, so hopefully you're back and you've already done it, and you've got negative 10x minus 45. In this one, you're going to have negative 10k plus 5. Here we're going to have negative 3t minus 1. And then here we're going to have 40 plus 20j. Here we're going to have 3p minus 21. And then here we're going to have negative 12d plus 22. Alright. So, first we want to write the expression for the perimeter, and then we do want to simplify it. So think about that one. The perimeter is adding up all the sides. So if this side is 3x minus 2, this side is 3x minus 2. If this side is x plus 6, this side is x plus 6. So we're going to start with the unsimplified version. So again, since we've got 2 of this side, we've got 2 times 3x minus 2. And then we've got 2 of this side, so plus 2 times x plus 6. Let's go ahead and distribute this first 2, and that will simplify this term up here. So here we get 6x minus 4 plus, let's distribute this one, we've got 2x plus 12. Then let's combine our like terms. We've got 6x plus 2x, that's going to be 8x. And then negative 4 plus 12, that's going to be plus 8. So we get 8x plus 8. Let's go ahead and look at 16. Determine the distance between points A and B if A to C is 10x minus 5. So let's do 10x minus 5. And then we want to subtract that 2x plus 7. Now, when we're subtracting, we want to think of a coefficient on the outside of negative 1. So let's distribute that negative 1. So we're going to have 10x minus 5 minus 2x minus 7. Now we can combine our like terms, so we've got 8x minus 12. There's our final answer. Now that was sort of a tricky one in that you did not see a number on the outside there, but you still had to think about distributing it, and if there is no coefficient listed, well, that's one of our properties, is multiplying by 1 does not change the expression, so our coefficient was 1. Let's look at this one. We're going to look at a few different ways to write it. So one thing we could factor out is the largest common factor, which is a 6. So if we factor out the 6, then we could get 2x plus 1. We could factor out a 4, for example. No, we couldn't factor out a 4. We can factor out a 3. And then we could get 4x plus 2. And we could also factor out a 2. So if we factor out a 2, that's 6x plus 3. Now I didn't get those lined up perfectly well, so maybe I'll change the sizing of my text a little bit. Oh, well, that's close enough. Likewise, we can factor out terms here, and instead I'm just going to write them over here on the left because I don't want to bother with the lines over there. So first we could just factor out an 8, right? So then we would have negative x minus 3. We could factor out a 2. Then we would have negative 4 minus 12. We could factor out a 4, and then we would have negative 2x minus 6, or we could factor out a negative number. Say we could factor out a negative 8, and then we would have an x plus 3. Anything that results when we multiply it back to this would be an acceptable thing to factor out. Alright, so go ahead and summarize today's lesson. Looks like I need to get rid of those 2 lines. Oh, that's not, yep, that worked. Talk about what we've done, talk about sort of how negatives can complicate things, and then go ahead and work on today's assignment.